and welcome back to Love and Law. My name is Virginia Warren. I'm a lawyer and conflict alchemist and co-founder of the organisation called Lawyers for Love. At Lawyers for Love, we believe that the legal system in its present form is fear-based. It uses fear-based techniques to solve conflict. It says, love thy neighbour, and if you don't, we'll punish you. It acts as if you still need a parent. Lawyers for Love say to solve a problem, you need to move to a higher level of consciousness than that which was used to create the conflict. That consciousness is based in love, and love says, love thy neighbour. And if you can't do that, we'll guide you. It basically shows you or guides you how to self-regulate. This is what we call love as of the essence consciousness, or Leotech for short. In these live broadcasts, we are showcasing lawyers globally who are bringing their own unique style of love into legal practice. And today it's my great pleasure to speak with New Earth lawyer Geraldine Johns-Putra. She's a lawyer around in Melbourne and expert in enterprise governance, purpose, business and human rights and modern slavery. Geraldine focuses on enterprises pursuing purpose and actors in the impact economy. Working with boards to optimise performance, she helps enterprises embed purpose and integrate human rights into their business. Her mission is to use the law to build more purposeful enterprises and ecosystems for a happier world. She's also the host of the New Earth Lawyer podcast, of which I've been a guest, featuring conversations with lawyers changing the practice of law to change the world. Welcome today, Geraldine. It's so wonderful to speak with you again and to be on the other side of the microphone. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Virginia. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me on your show. So I'm feeling like I'm on, yes, definitely on the other side.
On the other side.
But it's great.
That's fun. Yeah, so what we start by asking the lawyers that come on this program are, what motivated you to get into legal practice in the first instance?
Well, now you're taking me back quite a few years. I grew up in a pretty in some ways conventional family. My background is Malaysian. My mum is Chinese Malaysian. My dad's Indian Malaysian. And so I had an Asian mum. So there's the stereotype of her wanting to make sure that all her kids had good professional degrees and jobs. So I was interested in lots of things when I was a kid, anthropology, sociology, archaeology. I was interested in people, communities. And then I got interested in economics. And then when I got into university, I first started with economics, and then I took an elective in law, and I did quite well at it. And I said to my mum, I think I want to become a lawyer. And she was thrilled because I have three sisters, four of us, right? And none of us was going to do law. We already had one who was doing medicine. So strictly speaking, that's why I got into the law, because I wanted to make sure that my mum was happy. And then, with the university degree, I also found that I was starting to enjoy the law subjects. So I did it. Along the way in law school, I probably learned more about the social justice aspect, and that started to come up in me, but originally to be a good daughter.
Yeah, okay, that's beautiful. So, yeah, I think that is rather a sort of an Asian sort of trait. And even I think Europeans, I've had quite a few European lawyers that I've spoken to that are expected to go through those processes as well. It's like the family expects you to perform,
it's an
do something,
ancestral thing.
Succeed. Yeah, exactly. And that's good in its place, and we learn all about those things. But so you've gotten into law, and you've been practicing law. What has helped you shift to this place? You are now the New Earth lawyer. So tell me the little bit about the journey that got you from law school to a legal practice and then out the other end to New Earth lawyer. Perhaps it had something to do with archaeology.
It did, and that was the archaeology interest came from just a curiosity, right? Like there's something about the way the world operates that there's secrets to be dug up right? That was where I was coming from as a kid. But I had, like, I think many of us who have done law have different sides emerge as we go through law school and as we become practitioners. And the side that emerged as I was going through law school was a quite ambitious, goal-oriented side. I'm still goal-oriented, and I'm still there's parts of my personality that's very conscientious and diligent. And that side came out in full force. I became very perfectionistic and very competitive. I mean, I've been competitive all through my childhood, and so on. So what happened was I got out of law school and got an article position, as we called it then, trainee position, we call it now, with a mid-sized law firm. And it was a great firm. And I was doing, commercial work, as we called it. So buying, selling businesses, drafting commercial contracts, some IT work with that law firm. But I had this ambition I wanted to do M&A, which was like the sexy thing. So I went off and joined a national law firm, became an M&A lawyer. And all the while I was just climbing up the ladder. So I became a senior associate, and then decided I wanted to go overseas. So I went overseas because I speak Chinese. And so I ended up in Shanghai with a global law firm. I mean, the steps got bigger and bigger, right? So wow, now I'm with this global magic circle law firm, and I'm traveling all over the world, and so on and so forth. So I was totally caught up in that. And then around 2008 or 2009, I had an incident happened that was personal. So it was related to a relationship. And these are I find it's not so uncommon that there's a relationship angle. I mean, this is about love, right? So it hits at something personal, and I was kind of shaken out of my very professional mode to think, wait, there's something going on here. There were a lot of coincidences attached to one particular person, and you just get this knowing that there's something that's trying to get your attention. If I were to relate the coincidences to people, yes, people would say, oh, that's pretty strange that, this happened or that happened, but they wouldn't necessarily say, oh yeah, that was a spiritual occurrence. But when it happens to you, there's something weird here, right? It's just too bizarre. Yeah. And so that was happening around this person. And so that prompted me to think there's some connection here. And so I got into, up until that time, I wasn't sure whether I was an atheist or agnostic. I definitely wasn't a spiritual believer, even though I always had this interest in, ghost stories and things. Anyway, so I started to look into soul connections. And I remember being I was actually in London at this time. So I moved on to London, still working as a lawyer in this large law firm. And I remember being in a bookstore and picking up the Brian Weiss book, Many Lives, Many Masters, I think.
Or Paths or something. Yes, something like that. Yes.
It's about soul contracts and past lives, right? And I'm like, I started reading this book and I'm going, oh my God, I think this is what's happening here. And then I went I remember my first QHH. It was just a hypnotherapy, past life regression. Yeah. And I was still totally blocked going, this is not, I'm not really believing this. But then it led me into this whole kind of broad spectrum of spiritual knowledge, right? I started to read channeled books. I read almost all of the Seth material, Jane Roberts. I was a big fan of that. And this 2008, 2009, I had this massive change. And I actually quit the law around that time for a year and a half because I was burnt out. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. And I often think back to that time, Virginia. 2012 was coming up. There was a big watershed year for tons of people. And I often think back to that time as like, it was almost like the training wheels it was like we're preparing for something big, but I wasn't quite totally ready. I was just awakening. And it was my first go out of leaving the law. And years later, I kind of repeated that in a cycle, in a spiral of we keep repeating things.
Yeah, the patterns.
When we come around again, it's at a higher level of consciousness.
Yeah.
So around that time, I wasn't quite ready. But something was happening to me. And so it created, I began to understand that there was something beneath, my archaeology example. There was something beneath, and I was digging it up. So I continued digging and digging, but then I went back into the law after my break. I ended up at a law firm, in Hong Kong. I traveled a lot. I ended up working there. It was an Australian law firm, and I had a much healthier mindset, but I was still fully in the traditional ways of practicing law. And with my healthier mindset, I actually was determined to make partner. So when I say it's a healthier mindset, I was beginning to understand that I was more in control of my reality. So I was learning how to manifest. And I actually, at some point, I think I manifested partnership for myself, right? Because I was saying affirmations every day and visualizing it. I remember visualizing every day. I would say, I'm going to make partner, I'm going to make partner. And then I had this visualization of someone shaking hands at me and saying, congratulations. And then a couple of years later, that actually happened.
Yeah.
In a kind
of felt that reality. You felt, that's it. You feel that reality, and that reality is real.
Yeah. And I thought, okay, now I've made it. I've got to the top of this mountain, and I thought this was great, but it just doesn't, it's never enough in terms of in the old three-dimensional world. It's not enough, because you've got to then create the business flow, etc. if you're a partner. But then the cognitive dissonance with my spiritual self was getting larger and larger and larger, because it's like, okay, you think you've made it, but you're really not happy now.
Yeah. So
then I ended up having to clean up certain aspects of my life, because the cognitive dissonance was creating such unhappiness. I was drinking too much alcohol. I was, keeping unhealthy habits. So I remember I quit drinking alcohol because I thought, no, this is really unhealthy. And that was 2015. I was already a partner. And, I felt much better. And I think that was a massive boost spiritually, because around that time, I also decided I needed to stop my nomadic traveling from city to city. And I wanted to come back to Melbourne. So I came back to Melbourne. And it was, all of that came together. So a healthier lifestyle. I became a more serious runner. I moved back home. I felt settled. And because Melbourne had become home after growing up in Malaysia, I had actually become a migrant here in Australia, and I felt that Melbourne was home. So it was around that time that I began to think, okay, now I've cleaned myself up. I need to find out what my purpose is. And I was still doing corporate mergers and acquisitions. And then I went to do ayahuasca in Peru in 2017, which I've spoken about on my podcast. And
tell me a little bit about that here, because I think my listeners would like to hear that as well.
So the ayahuasca experience was around, so here I am searching for purpose, right? Which right now I do purpose work as well for corporations, trying to be more purpose-led. So there's a lot of reflections now back into the work that I do. But I was looking for personal purpose, and personal purpose work is really important work, right? It's kind of establishing what your mission is here on Earth as a soul. So I'd been woken up. I'd been motivated to clean myself up physically. So now I had to go find out what my purpose was. And I ended up in Peru in 2017 in August, which was around the time of a massive solar eclipse. I don't know if you recall this, but it was...
I know what happened. I remember that event very well, personally. Yes.
Yeah. So that was actually I was in Peru when that happened.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so I went there with very, very clear intentions. Once again, very conscientious. I'd written down my intentions. I journaled. I was meditating. And I wanted to know my purpose. So I had one session in ayahuasca in Peru. You take it full on with the shamans around you singing their Icaros, which is their chants, in the dark at night in a massive hut. It's a great experience to do it properly in that setting. Um, and I had this long conversation with ayahuasca in this big session. It was I think it was my 5th session out of 7 that I did in Peru. And I had this conversation with ayahuasca where I remember having her, it's a feminine energy to me, the ayahuasca energy. I was going under, and she was saying to me, like, okay, we want to know, do you intend to drink alcohol anymore? And I was very insistent, no. And I must have had this question asked of me about 5-6 times, and I said no. And I'd taken a larger dose of ayahuasca than I had previously on my own intuition. And I was lying down, because you lie down after you take ayahuasca because it makes you dizzy. And also people tend to throw up and purge what they need to purge. Ayahuasca induces that. So people lie down on mattresses in this hut, which is a circular hut. And I was lying down, and then I went out of it, totally out of it. So I had that conversation with ayahuasca, and then I went deeply under. And the next thing I remember, I was having a conversation with a different energy, which was, I didn't know what it was, but it wasn't ayahuasca, because I knew the energy signature of ayahuasca by then. And we were having this conversation, and they were telling me why I was here, which was the answer, right? I'd gone to Peru wanting to find out my purpose and my mission. Anyway, so we had this conversation, and they basically started to tell me about coming into power, my own power. And then I have a soul contract with someone here about coming into their power. And it was the first indication I had of this idea that human beings need to step up to something. I hadn't heard of, I'd heard of 2012, but I wasn't aware of this whole ascension movement or awakening movement. Ascension wasn't part of my context. And then they also said, when I thought to ask, well, who are you? And they said, it's they again. It was a collective energy, right? And they said, oh, we're from the stars. And I remember, even under the influence of ayahuasca, thinking, this is weird. Once again, when we talk much more about galactic energies now, and I think there's more of an understanding how the galactic energies are actually aspects of ourselves and connected in with our spiritual ascension. But back then, 2017, I wasn't aware of it. I considered myself fairly spiritual, but I wasn't into that aspect. I thought about UFOs as about abductions and military agendas. Yeah. And that was my exposure to the UFO world. I certainly wasn't expecting to go to Peru and then find something was contacting me from the stars.
Yeah.
So it is long. I've written down the whole conversation. And they told me at the end of it, because I was like, well, I'm supposed to do this particular mission. How am I going to know that you're real? And they said, well, trust your intuition. Always trust your intuition. And
absolutely,
so got out of it, and I remember just having to absorb it, and so that was actually the big shift, a massive shift, because I came back and I had to integrate it and try and understand what it was all about. And it was only after dealing with that galactic experience, because I was pretty on the one hand I was asking, what was it, who was it, where was it coming from? But on the other hand, I just had this deep sense of, it's real.
Yeah,
it's
real. It's a knowing. It's my favorite word, the knowing. I love that. And what I like about this part of your journey is the idea of alignment, of coming into alignment, the cognitive reflection. on this, I know this, and when I come more into alignment with who I am, then things like alcohol and other things that aren't serving you well drop off. Well, that's what happened to me. In August 2017, I stopped drinking alcohol.
Oh.
And it was a natural, today I choose, I'm going to drink that last bottle of wine, and that's it. And there was no more. It was just like, okay, that's done, finish, move on. There's no more, oh, I wish I was drinking with everybody else. I couldn't think of anything worse anymore. It just doesn't align with me. And various other things that have happened, cane sugar, things like that. They're all heavy energies to me. But they fell away naturally. All the things that didn't serve me, the closer I got to my own alignment, my own purpose, and it is a knowing. As you just said, you can't, prove this to anybody or anything, but everyone has that knowing within them. If they just be silent, stop listening to all the media, stop listening to everything, shut yourself away a little bit and just hear what bubbles up. That's what I think anyway.
The connection, so the intuition, coming back from Peru, I did nurture my intuition. It gets stronger and you tend to get to know what's ego talking to you, and what's really higher self, divine influence. And you can, the more you do it, the quicker it becomes, and the more you can rely on it.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't remember the woman's name, unfortunately, but we're just speaking about a woman who's written a book, something like it only takes 7 seconds, and she said that's a long time. She talks about businesses and businesses making decisions intuitively. It's a nanosecond. That first response you get to something is usually the right one. If you've cleared your energy, if you're in better alignment, that is the way to do it. I absolutely love that. And I think we're becoming more of an intuitive society the more we let go of these attachments that we have. Yeah. But it's not that easy for people. And I think the modern time, the way things are, everything's confusing for everybody right now. Everything is absolutely so confusing. No one knows who to trust. And for me, I believe there's a reason behind it. If you can't trust anybody, maybe it's time to go back to self. What do I feel? What do I feel about all of this?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me, right? Because I was beginning to trust my intuition more and more, and refer to self more and more. Not in a selfish service to self way, right? But beginning to think, okay, now I've got this sense of mission. I've come back with a better idea of what I'm here to do. And I was still working I was a partner in a large law firm. So the energies around me, I remember being very sensitive to energies. So I would go into work and I would have to shut my door. I remember coming back and having to shut my door, and just having to shut out energies from other people. I could feel really, it wasn't malicious energy. It was people who were stressed.
Yeah.
Their own stress I could feel. So I was beginning to get a sense that I needed to change my own work. So I moved away from M&A, the beloved M&A that I pursued when I was younger, to corporate governance, purpose work. I sought out organizations who were trying to make corporations better, and I now work for these sorts of organizations. I got into modern slavery, which is
that sounds like working in a law firm to me.
Well, that's interesting, you see, because I do modern slavery work, and I know that this whole concept of slavery is actually, it's a little bit of a distraction. The way we look at modern slavery today, it's very important, definitely, the work that's going on, and I'm very happy to work with clients to rid their supply chains of the influence of modern slavery or the impact of modern slavery. But it's really kind of the look over there, get distracted by that kind of thing, when we need to look at our own lives and see the enslavement that we're agreeing to. So I always have this, this keep keep your eye on the big picture. Yes, it's important to help the worst examples of it, but always remember that we here in our Western liberal democracies, thinking that we're free and so on, well, I mean, it's been proven to us that we're not so free, right?
We've got glitter on the bars, is what I say. We've just put glitter on the jails, in the jail cell. It's just, it looks pretty around here. We must be free, but no, we're not.
Yeah, and the deception is just cleverer.
Yeah,
the deception is more hidden, right? It's just much more subtle. So yes, a modern slavery work I do, and then even that I was doing it within the environment of a large law firm, and I just had to do it in a different way. I felt the pressure of dealing with clients in a particular way. I felt the pressure of billable hours. I felt the pressure of imposing billable hours on my team, and all of the rest of it. So at the end of 2019, I left. 2020, I left. So it was after COVID hit, and I left partnership and set up my own little practice. So now you can see the progression, right? So now I work completely on my own. I still do the work I was doing at the large law firm, but I do it in my own way, which is very liberating.
Yeah, and can you explain to us how different that is when you say in a different way? What is different?
Well, I express myself more with a lot more authenticity. So one of the things that I found most suffocating in a large corporate environment is the messaging. You know, there is a sense of obligation. If you're senior or in leadership, there's a sense of obligation. I felt a sense of obligation to my partners. I mean, there are things about the whole structure, the people-oriented aspects of a large partnership structure are sound, or, you know, I value them. So if you look at a partnership, you know, there's something quite noble about the concept of a partnership. You know,
it's a connection. I think it's a connection.
Yeah, it's a connection. Yeah. There's especially the joint and several liability, you know, plus backing other people up and all of this. So I felt obliged to my partners to do the right thing. And I have this big thing about doing the right thing and so on. And I couldn't express myself, right? Because it's like, well, you're a partner, you're carrying this heavy brand on you. And if you start talking about galactic connections and ayahuasca, people are going to go, oh my God. So I was feeling that, right? Yeah. So now on my own, I get to do my podcast. I get to talk to you. I wouldn't speak to you, Virginia, on this podcast if I was still a partner with a large law firm. I'd be really concerned about it.
Yeah, that's it. I know that to be true from others that I speak to off the record. They won't come and talk to me on the record because, I've got a brand to hold up. And that's sad to me. It's inauthentic, but that's their choice and that's their life.
Yeah, I mean, I laugh at the training programs to teach people how to be authentic. You know, you can't get more inauthentic than that.
Than trying to be authentic. You know what authenticity is. Be yourself. If you don't know what that is, explore it. Try things. Do things. It's up to you. No one can teach you authenticity.
Which connects in with other agendas that you find in large corporates. They always have this really noble, positive initial intention, but get completely hijacked. Like diversity is another one that gets me. You know, we want diversity because we want people to be themselves, but then you end up with a lot of people who look different but sound the same.
I think when you mention democracy, it's a similar thing in political parties. You go in and you have an idea, you want to represent your constituents, and then you become the machine. And I call that an egregore. It's an energy, it's a thought form. So it can't be helped. If you resonate with the thought form, you will become it. So you need to figure out what is my resonance. And this is why Lawyers for Love are saying it is all energy, people. It's all energy. We deal with people as if they're just energetic beings focused into this reality. Because if you are resonating with a thought form, you become that. So then look at, why was I sucked into that idea? Why, And why is when you had to shut your door in your legal practice to keep the energy out there, as soon as you open the door, you're in it again. Yeah. Do I want to be there? They're the questions that you ask. And I think these realizations are slowly, I think people are coming to understand them, and the egregore is dissolving a little because people are taken out of the workplace to work remotely. So even though it still carries a big energy about it, it's helping people break away a little bit to make a decision. How do I want to live my life? Do I want to keep doing that? Do I want to do my own thing? All these questions.
I agree. I totally agree, because that's what the lockdown helped me to do, because lockdown in Melbourne, well, all over Australia, happened in March 2020. And then we were firmly locked down for many months after in Melbourne. And I actually was relieved at not having to go into the office, because I didn't have to experience that energy. And it wasn't just the office, but as I would go into the Melbourne CBD, I would start to feel it.
Yes. I actually, just because I'm in Queensland now, and I was in Melbourne as well, and I recently drove back to Melbourne, and boy, could I feel the energy in around Melbourne. I thought, oh, it's almost strangling. And I was very relieved to drive back to Queensland and just think, oh, well, the energy is so different here. And I don't know what it is. I think there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of, we have to be a certain way to succeed, because of course people's idea of success is based in that thought form. And the recent study, what makes lawyers happy, that it was a prescription data to driven success, and it said authenticity and autonomy are the keys to a really happy existence. However, people know this. They know this. I know happiness comes from within, etc., etc. However, they can't get there. They can't get to the within because the egregore sucks them into that energy. It's the vortex. It's just as soon as you start engaging with it and you have some of that in you, oh no, I still need to get the Porsche to be successful. And because everybody else is there, and you need to be, pulled out and have the ability to separate yourself from it and reflect.
You have to have a very strong ability to insulate yourself. And I think that's a level of mastery that not many of us have achieved. I certainly haven't. Yeah. So even in lockdown, we would have regular partnership calls, right? And we would have a Zoom call with all of the partners, as well as more localized business unit calls and so on, department calls. And with every call, you get sucked into what you're calling egregore, and I call it cluster consciousness. It's its own little world. Yeah, it's its own little world. Because everybody's thinking the same way, focusing on the same things. So like you said, with our thoughts, we are creating this world, and you enter it. And when you're in it, it's all real. The targets, the budget, the performance reviews, the client feedback, this, and this, it becomes very real, even though everything I've mentioned is invented. All of those things that I mentioned are man-made or human-made, right? But it's so real because we
hold it together by our thoughts. We just all hold it together. And that's what that came to me one day. I'm standing in my own legal practice, and I thought, gee, if I walked out the door and just walked out, and everyone walks out the door and goes home, that energy still exists. That entity called my legal practice still exists. Yeah. I thought, why is that? It's because there's a thought form created around it. The energies of your thoughts create everything. And even a relationship with somebody, we all know we go into a relationship with one person and you'll act a little bit differently because that's the energy that's been created in that relationship. And this one, they're all got tiny little egregores around them. And it's just being mindful of where you're headed, what energy you're swimming in, and keeping your energy clean. Energy hygiene, I like to call it. Yeah. They're very, very interesting things. But just even to bring people's awareness to that, I think is a really valuable thing. And they don't have to do anything, just, okay, why am I thinking that? What dragged me into that?
And what's so interesting about the world we live in now is that we're creating these egregores digitally. So we're creating them on social media.
Yeah.
We're creating them in Zoom rooms. So we have to be careful what we are creating now. We're not just doing it in physical groups.
Yeah,
we're doing it on digital.
And I think
platforms.
comments on social media are really important. There's a great deal of negative energy on both sides. Everybody's arguing. People are position basis. I believe this. I believe that. Well, that's great. How do we mesh those ideas that people have? I don't believe it's going to happen that easily on media because people are just being negative. It's just a negative position, just rather than, oh, I see. One person said something like, I have my choice, you have your choice. Let's just respect each other's choices. Let's live and let live. Just let's do that. But not many people can do that. It's the idea of control, and I'm in fear. And these times are ideal to bring all this to the surface of how much we're living in fear. It's not a nice place to live.
Yeah. I know. And as lawyers, because our business is risk, and teaching people or advising people how to avoid risk, minimize risk,
manage it,
manage risk. So we actually, that's our trade. That's what we trade in. And very much attached to that is fear.
Yes.
So as lawyers, we walk around creating this kind of fear-based worlds, for our clients and ourselves. And we walk around always assessing risk.
Yeah, so we're animating it. We look at it, we animate it. It's just like, oh, there's a risk. The world's full of risks. So therefore, the world is full of risks.
And therefore, everyone has to be afraid and look out for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's, the part of the New Earth Lawyer Project, the podcast, is to talk to lawyers who are introducing another way of thinking about lawyering. So removing that fear-based element and injecting more trust, which is kind of like the opposite of it, right? So the work that I'm seeing myself doing, going back to this idea of an ascension or consciousness shift, let's call it, a shift into higher consciousness, is as I was following my intuition all the way. So, that's been sharpening and sharpening and sharpening. So moving out of big law into my own practice was part of it. And I've been guided not to really see myself as running this legal practice full time. So I don't do it full time. Obviously it's an important part of what I do, but I also do other things. And one of the other things I do is I work with organizations that are advancing a fairer agenda, shall we say, a fairer way of doing things. So like purpose-led corporations and
compassion. Yeah, I love the word compassion. I think it's a beautiful word, just showing compassion for the planet, compassion for the self, and compassion for others.
And those roles, non-executive advisory type roles, they present themselves, and I look at the organization, and if the values align, then I am happy to be part of it. So that's the next part of what I do. And then the last part is the New Earth Lawyer, which is really turning into a platform for what I was talking about. Plus, I'm looking at how there's a larger movement, the integrative law movement, which Kim Wright, whom we both know, was instrumental in establishing, and looking at bringing that in a more formal way, or a more, shall we say, recognized way into Australia.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Because we certainly need more of that. There are many of us out there. We're just we're all sort of coming together slowly. I think media and being remote has helped us all to connect, as the paradox that is. And I see so many paradoxes right now. So yeah, absolutely. I'm loving all the things that you do, and And I probably wrap it up about now. We're 40 minutes in, so that's been beautiful. Great to speak to you, Geraldine. If you're a lawyer who brings love into law in your own unique way, we'd love to hear from you, because yes, there are integrative lawyers and loving lawyers and compassionate lawyers and all these beautiful higher consciousness lawyers coming out of the crystal closet now, as I like to say. And it's lovely. It's a safe place. Come and talk to us. And thanks so much, Geraldine.
Thank you.
We'll see you all next time.
Thank you.